Welcome back, as promised, This Week in America on the Blue Funk Broadcasting Radio Network. Excellent book. Our guest on the program today, Dr. Keith Kanter. The book is called Your Family Matters, Solutions to Common Parental Dilemmas. So much information in this book, Dr. Kanter. Great to have you on the program. Lots to talk about today. Well, I want to start off by just talking a little bit about you and how you've been able to find that balance that as parents we all strive for. I mean, you teach, you've got a practice, you write books. You're on a number of boards. You're an active coach, a participant in your three kids' activity. How difficult was it for you to find that balance professionally and personally in giving these kids the attention they deserve?
Well, you know, Rick, I think it's something that everybody has to work on. Balancing time, it's so tricky, especially if you have a real rich life and you've got kids, too. You know, it's really a question of, I'm a big believer in just trying to stay organized, balancing your schedule. It's like how people live healthfully, balancing out exercise and education and reading and things like that and friendships. It's really a good way to live, and it's amazing if you separate time, including separate time for your kids, you know, you can get it done. You just have to be realistic and really write it down.
One of the chapters in the book, and we're going to talk extensively about Dr. Kanter's book, Your Family Matters, Solutions to Common Parental Dilemmas. And you can get information on our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Information on the book, go directly to Dr. Kanter's website, which is Kanner, KANNER.TV. Fascinating reading. One is signs of burnout. And we talk about time management and all this other. We see more and more issues now where kids are like, maybe they express it, maybe they don't, maybe they do by body language, like, enough is enough. I can't do much more. How big a problem now is burnout? Because we all want our kids active, and we start so young now getting them involved in organized activities.
You know, it's more and more common, Rick, and it manifests itself in different ways. Some kids, they get depressed. Other kids get anxious. Other kids, they gut through it, but they're terribly unhappy. But, we're in a time where competition to get into colleges and to get jobs, it's so extensive now that people are having to go to measures and do things that we never had to do 10, 20 years ago. And so our kids are under an amazing amount of pressure, and the parents, too, of trying to keep their kids being successful. So, like we were talking about earlier, you've got to balance not only your life, but you've got to be realistic and help your kids balance theirs, too. And I'm a big believer that, when we help kids get through anything from their education to sports, we've got to work together with them to make sure that what they're doing is realistic and they're functionally capable. Because if they start to get overwhelmed, it's not going to help them or anybody else.
Well, you mentioned the word together, which I think is interesting. So often as parents, and when you think back when our kids were little, you see it happen with others, we sort of pick what they're going to be involved in, and you're saying this is together, and certainly listen to the input of the child as to whether or not they want to participate in what you've chosen for them.
Well, I think a good example is, wanting kids to do different things, sports, arts, sciences, different things, elective activities, let's say. And, working together means that parents have very good intentions of wanting their kids, for example, to be physically active or to be good in school. And it's a question of, letting your kids know how important those things are, but also, letting them pick. For example, with sports, it's really important for kids to have some sort of physical activity. We've got obesity issues, and we've got diabetes in children, and it's getting worse. And by, for example, telling your kids, hey, sports are important or activity is important, but, hey, you can pick the activity. You can pick whether you play this or play that, but wanting them to do something is, something that comes from the parents, but working together with your child in choice. And when you do that, it's a win for everybody. It really is, because your kids will benefit. They got to pick something. You feel better as a parent that you encourage them to do something physically active. And, we can relate that to just about anything. And when kids feel like they have more of a choice, then they're happier to do it.
Dr. Kanter's book is Your Family Matters, Solutions to Common Parental Dilemmas. One of the things you talk about, and it really gets you thinking, is consider when you're talking about the activities for the kids, quality over quantity, that rather than being in a lot and maybe not really being that engaged, things that they like to do and really buy into it wholeheartedly and get something from it.
Well, kids are different than adults, Rick. Attention spans are less, and kids get bored. They do. They actually get bored easily, especially with kids between the ages of about 7 and 11. They're big in conquering things. They want to be good at so many different things, and that's normal, but they get bored easily. So I say to parents, don't sign them up for programs for too long. Give them choice. Shorter programs. Let them do a number, for example, of different camps for summer or whatnot, because, it gives them a taste of lots of things. But if kids feel like, they're stuck in a sport, for example, for a long time, they may get tired of it, and then that's going to be a real aversion for them to continue to play that particular sport.
You're listening to This Week in America. Our website is thisweekinamerica.us. Our guest is Dr. Keith Kanner, Kanner. His book is called Your Family Matters, Solutions to Common Parental Dilemmas. It's available at our website. You can get all the information, thisweekinamerica.us, or Dr. Kanner's website, Kanner TV. Let's talk, and we've touched on sports, and that's something that's so important in the lives, at least parentally speaking, in the lives of so many kids. What are the expectations? Now, your kids play and you coach. What are the expectations for youth sports?
Well, for me, the most important thing for kids is that they enjoy what they're doing. I mean, with sports as an example, and we can say this with kids who are in arts and music as well, you really want them to develop passions for things. That's so important, because when people, adults and children alike, have actual passions for something that really makes them feel good inside, look, they're going to want to do it more. And sports works that way with kids too. So, I make sure with my kids that, my kids all know that I think exercise is important. All of my kids, all three of them, play sports recreationally and competitively. But, they had a lot of choice in terms of the sports that they decided to pick. And most importantly, I'm a big believer in, helping them learn how to play the sports fundamentally. So recreational sports are, kids learning how to play basketball, learning how to play soccer. And once the mechanics are there, they actually can play better. And once your kids feel comfortable doing something that they can master, they're going to develop a passion to do it. So I promote my kids to, look, do some activities, have some fun. You don't have to do it forever. And 2 out of my 3 kids, one of them's playing 3 different sports and another one's playing 2, and they love it. They really love it, and that's great.
Well, that was a very broad question I asked, expectations. Let's break it down a little bit further. I'm sure the expectations for someone playing at age 3 different than someone who's playing at age 12. At what point do you sort of shift from recreation to making it a competitive sport where you're actually keeping score and there is competition?
It's such a good question. I've written a lot about this. If we introduce competitive sports to kids too early, they do burn out, and it becomes much more of a sense of winning or losing, to the point where when they lose, they get so upset they don't want to play it again. So you have to be careful about the ages. I seriously recommend that people don't get their kids into competitive sports until almost middle school, because in the earlier times, you really want them to enjoy what they're doing, master the skills, have fun playing it. And there's going to be plenty of time once kids get into middle school and high school where sports become very competitive, school versus school. So being careful to encourage kids to play sports. Don't get too big on winning and losing. They'll do that anyway. But parent expectations need to be that you really want your kid to enjoy and learn a sport, play it comfortably, and then gradually, as they get older and more comfortable with issues of competition, they're going to want to be more competitive naturally. And it's just one of those things. With the risk kids are the 8, 9-year-olds who are so focused on winning and losing anyway that if you add on a competitive sports to that, many kids at that age will not go on to play sports in middle school and high school because it's just too upsetting for them.
Well, you point out it's an important part of development, so it's so much more than just keeping score and winning and losing. It really teaches life lessons at a young age for kids.
Well, kids are going to win and lose anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, in school, with friends, playing games. And when you add on competitive sports too early for kids, then, in a sense, you're pushing them too fast. And parents have to be careful about not having too high expectations for their kids based on their development. And parents really do need to understand, and I talk about that in my book, they have to understand where their child is developmentally, what they're capable of doing. A 9-year-old is different than an 11-year-old or a 6-year-old, and you have to understand the capabilities of your child based on their capacity as a child. Otherwise, your expectations may be completely mismatched.
Dr. Keith Kanner, the guest on This Week in America, Your Family Matters is his new book. One thing you talk about, and maybe I'm old-fashioned here, but I just think this is still crucial, and I know today it's difficult to work it out, and that's the role of the family dinner. I've seen so many studies that if done effectively and done on an ongoing basis, it's really this bonding. I look back with fond memories of family dinners with our kids.
Family dinners are wonderful. It's a time, and as long as you do it right. I mean, there's a right and a wrong way to do a family dinner, but the idea of having everybody there present after a day at school, at work, whatnot, is so important because it brings everybody together in a place where they're looking at each other and there's a capacity to interact. Now, anybody who has kids and sits at a table knows that if you interrogate at a table and you ask too many questions or something like that, you're not going to get a good response. But if you start talking about neutral topics with your children, the weather, you talk about politics, you talk about different things, then your youngest to oldest will feel like they have something to say. So it's not only pulling everybody together, but it's also, finding things to talk about that might be enjoyable and that everybody can participate in. But all of our research is showing, family dinners are, wonderful tools to help kids stay on track. It gives you a chance to interact. Parents can assess how their kids are doing at the table. You can look at them and see how they look. And it's a time to really kind of review stuff that maybe the family wants to do together as a unit.
Well, you talk in the book about how to make this a conversation rather than an interrogation. If you sit there with a clipboard and things you want to find out from your kids, it's wasted time. It's not going to work. In fact, it'll probably backfire on you.
Probably so. And if you start talking about one child's, A's versus another's B's, you can see where the dinner table's probably not going to be too happy of a place. You want to keep it neutral and open and try to get everybody to, demonstrate their point of view. It's a really good tactic.
One of the chapters is children and divorce, and it's something that unfortunately so many kids are faced with. And again, it's like so many topics in the book. It's different at an early age than it is at a later age. Let's talk a little bit about how you go about this. And first of all, should you be very honest in explaining the situation, and when should you start talking about it?
Well, it's one of those things where you have to be really sensitive in any divorce situation that your children are truly the victims of what's happened between you and your spouse. And it's very easy that when people get caught up in losses and divorces that sometimes parents become selfish and they don't think about the effect that this is having on their kids. And I always encourage parents, look, irrespective of what happens between you and your spouse, you've got to focus on the fact that you have children and your job is to protect them. So it's very important that if you're in a divorce situation or there's one that's planning, that you have to sit down with that spouse and say, look, we have got to work together on behalf of the children and try to make the experience as less traumatic as it's going to be anyway. In terms of telling the kids, it's very important that when parents sit down and talk to their kids, that they understand that their kids are going to have a multitude of emotions about it and that they might respond in all sorts of different ways. But very importantly, that there's no blame. There's no blame on this one or that one. There's no blame on the children because kids tend to personalize things. And you have to be very empathic and supportive and let them know, hopefully, that you're going to work together on making it as amicable as you can, despite the fact that it didn't work out. So you've got to do your homework with your parenting partner on how you're going to take care of the kids in two homes and really work that out and then go to your kids and tell them that something has happened and we need to talk about it, but also reassure them that you're going to get through it and help them through it.
This Week in America, our guest, Dr. Keith Kanter. A couple of minutes left in the program, going by, as it always does, way too quickly. Fascinating topics in Your Family Matters, solutions to common parental dilemmas. Let's talk about violent media and the role that plays and what, as parents, because it's pretty easy. In fact, I don't know how you would control what kids are doing now because there are so many instruments out there that connect them to other people, connect them to the media of various kinds. What should parents look for, and how negative is violent media?
Well, we've got all the research now, Rick. I mean, it's come out over the past years in terms of whether it's television or video games, that aggressive content, sexual content, if it's presented in a way that's too stimulating for a child's developmental level, it can cause psychological and behavioral problems. And it's very important that parents understand that you've got to look at your television set as another resource for your child, and you've got to watch the shows and really determine as to whether or not it's really good for them to watch something. Now, you make a good point that kids are going to see things all over the place, but what kids actually witness at home with their parents or in permission by their parents is the most meaningful. So what you control at home and what you present to your kids at home outweighs anything that they're going to see at a friend's house. And it's very important that kids know that, hey, mom and dad are looking out for me. Okay, I can't play that game or watch this type of movie because it's not for my age. And if they see it at somebody else's house, they're still going to know on the right side of their shoulder that, hey, mom and dad would not want me to do this, and they're in conflict, which, again, makes the impact much less.
How important is it to explain to them the difference between real life and the fantasy, the fiction they're seeing on television, movies, or video games?
Well, see, that's a great point. And normally kids, in terms of their mental capacity, kids by about the age of 6 and 7 start to give up those fantastic fantasies. Beliefs in different things start to change. Reality takes the place. But it's very confusing for a small child who is still in that fantasy life to watch some of the things that they might see on TV or on the Internet. It looks like real life to them, and oftentimes that can cause serious trauma for kids in terms of nightmares and bedwetting and behavioral problems. So you've got to remember that any child under the age of 6 is still thinking a lot in the world of fantasy, and they will look at a TV show as this is real life, versus a child who gets older. As kids get older, they're able to objectify more. And kids moving into the teenage years start to realize, okay, this is real life, this is not real life. But it is important that parents do clarify, especially if they're watching some movie that could be seen as disruptive, that they explain that this is just a movie and that this is written and it's based on people's dreams or fantasies. It's not based on something that actually happens. So you do want to clarify, especially if they ask you questions about it too.
The book is called Your Family Matters. Unfortunately, we're out of time. We will have Dr. Kanner back on the program. So many interesting topics here.
Thanks,
Your
Rick.
Family Matters. It's great to have you on the program. Our website.
Wonderful to be here.
Thank you. ThisWeekInAmerica.us. You can get all the information. You can get the book as well, or go to Dr. Kanner's website, and it's KANNER.TV. The book is called Your Family Matters, Solutions to Common Parental Dilemmas. You're listening to This Week in America.